through like making people laugh. And so that's quite an interesting issue as well.
Hey, can I just mention while you're getting your next book that if anyone has any questions, I've opened the chat function up so you can actually ask questions in that chat function as we go. And so I know that I'm not an expert at children's books. If I had children in my life, I might be asking a question here. So if you have any questions, just ask them as we go and everyone can see those questions. You can speak to anyone. Great.
Thanks, Chrissy. The other thing I should mention is that it's by Jacqueline Moriarty, which a lot of you may know for her other writing, and Australian author. Another really great Australian author is Bren McDibble.
What was the name of that series that you were just talking about for Annie?
It's called A Kingdoms and Empire book is the series. And the particular book I was talking about was The Stolen Prince of Cloudburst.
Great, thanks. As you were.
So Bren McDibble is another Aussie author, and what she does brilliantly, and my book club has really appreciated about her work, is that she places her book in a dystopian Australia, but that's more the setting of the book. She focuses on an adventure story. So this, the sea has risen, as you might guess from the title, across the risen sea. And there's a small community that lives fairly devoid of technology. It's kind of suspicious of electricity. And there's a lovely protagonist, Neoma. Her best friend is kidnapped. And so she steals her mom's catamaran and goes off to save him. This to me feels like a dystopian Enid Blyton adventure. It's got just the classic kind of quest tropes. It's got a pirate that attacks her that's very fierce. If you have someone who doesn't like too much danger, I wouldn't give it. But it's a nice 9 to 13 read. It's a little bit younger than Bren McDibble's other books. But this is kind of, I'd say most of these books are all-rounders. Like a lot of kids would really love this. And all my book club kids loved it. Echo Mountain by Lauren Wolk. This is one of my favorite authors. She writes with beautiful, like with wonder and delight. And she always has characters that are truthful and inquiring. This follows a girl during the Great Depression. Her family has moved out to a mountain, and her sister and mother aren't used to the idea of not being near people. And so, but she is drawn to the wildness of the place and she loves living there. It has a woman who lives on top of the hill that everyone thinks is a witch, but they actually knew in their past life and come to realize that. It looks at healing. It has music and someone who creates lutes. And it's a wonderful adventure, but it's also a really beautiful exploration of family. It would be great for anyone who loves, who is a reader, but also anyone who loves the wilderness. And moving a little bit older, we have Garth Nix's new title, The Left-Handed Booksellers of London. This is my favorite of his newer titles. And the great thing about this is it's actually probably perfect for 15 or 16-year-old, but as young as 12 could read it. It's set in the 80s. There are booksellers who, if you're dominant left-handed, you are the booksellers that unpack the boxes. If you're right-handed, you sell books to people. However, if you're left-handed, you also fight off monsters. And if you're right-handed, you're quite good at seeing into the future. And they're basically their role is to keep the underworld or the old world separate from our modern world. It's just a great adventure. It's a standalone. And the cover's been really appealing to kids in that 14 range. My book club kids asked to read it because it just grabbed them.
So there's just a question here, is if you can, when you're holding the book covers up, if you can hold them up still for a little bit so people can see the cover, that'd be great.
Sorry, gesticulation.
That's great. And the other question is, was the earlier book called The Dragon's Ark?
Oh, yes. That's The Dragon's Ark by, ooh.
Do you want to hold that one up?
There you go.
There we go. The Dragon's Ark. Great. Fantastic.
Right.
Cool.
Uh,
Yeah, great.
I've got two more titles. Does that one?
Okay.
Burn by Patrick Ness. A lot of people interested in YA will already know Patrick Ness. The marvelous thing that he does is that each of his books is written very differently to his others. Now, this is set during the 50s. Thank you, Fiona. Where it's the setting that you don't need to know about it is that the tension is building between the US and the Soviet Union to do with the space race, but there are dragons. Dragons inhabit most of Canada. They're seen as kind of lesser than humans and not really fashionable to talk to dragons. There's a prophecy building, and this book is curiously, I don't want to say too much in case any of you are Patrick Ness fans, but there's a parallel world involved, and the book is split into two kind of definitive halves. It also looks at how race was perceived in the US during that time, as well as people's views on being homosexual, and it deals with everything really empathetically and really curiously. And it's just a really good adventure.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Yeah. I think nearly everyone at Wild Things has read it and loved it. And it was another book club favorite. My favorite book is The End of the World is Bigger Than Love. Davina Bell is an Australian publisher and author. And this is another cover that's the kids have really been gravitating to. We have two sisters, Summer and Winter, who live in a world that is basically broken down. They're isolated and spend their time on an island that has fairy lights and their mother's old books of a box of old books that are old classics. The curious thing about this book is that you have no idea which of the sisters, it's told on diary entries, is telling you the truth. They're both unreliable narrators. And you're slowly piecing together how they came to be on this island, what happened to their parents, why are they so important, and why is there this mysterious tower that has something in it that they cannot talk about. When we did this at book club, the really cool thing was that we all read the ending completely differently, and everyone really loved talking about it. I think, and both voices of the sisters are quite different. One is really whimsical, one is kind of really banterful and kind of annoying. So it's a really great book for anyone who reads, but also if you're wanting to challenge anyone who's interested in the dystopian trope, it's like nothing you've ever read before for kids in that area. That is my favorite tales of the year. Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, that was really good. That's fantastic. I'm actually going to throw to Jennifer now, and Jennifer is going to talk about her best books of the year. So hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Chrissy. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here with you today. I have found this year of 2020 has just involved so many books coming from authors I truly love. So there've been so many wonderful books that I've been really anticipating them coming. One of them is Kate Grenville's A Room Made of Leaves. And I manage book clubs at Avid Reader and run a number as well. And this is one that I have read with one of my book clubs, and I absolutely loved it. So this is one that is Kate Grenville she's created a situation whereby the memoirs of Elizabeth MacArthur have been found, and Kate Grenville sets it up that she is merely the editor of these memoirs. So that's I guess the conceit of the novel, and she then goes on to create this wonderful inner life for Elizabeth MacArthur, and there's very little in history about her life in Australia or her life prior to that, and Kate Grenville has researched it meticulously. So it's a rich historical novel, but it has this wonderful internal experience of what I guess it's Kate Grenville's imagining of what Elizabeth MacArthur's life would have been. And Fiona, you really enjoyed this one as well, didn't you?
Yes, it really captivated me. Yes, I think it's I think it's one of her strongest books for a long time. And
Mm.
like you said, it really captures her emotional life, her internal emotional life. And then there's this wonderful little trick that is played at the end, and I really liked it.
It's a real pleasure to read, and it's such a beautiful book, and it has these lovely, I don't know how well they come across on the screen, but Elizabeth MacArthur's actual writing in her letters in the end papers, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and tremendous to discuss as well. Another one I've really been looking forward to, because I love everything by Richard Flanagan, The Living Sea of Waking Dreams. This is an extraordinary novel. It's about a family, 3 siblings who make the decision to to prolong their mother's life. Their mother is dying, and they make, I guess, that decision that life has primacy. And so it's then the story of how that impacts on the family members, but it's a much broader novel than that as well, because in considering the way technology affects our lives and the way medical science has evolved and the way that can enable certain decisions, and he's also looking at things like the way the use of technology affects us personally and how it changes us, and how in this world of such, you know, traumatic and dramatic climate change, and, you know, every different facet of our politics, that we can end up losing aspects of ourselves. It's really powerful. It's a novel that makes you think about the world we live in, and also makes you think about yourself and how technology may be changing you. It's really quite an extraordinary read.
So who do you think would like it? Just because I know there's one of our young booksellers here, Ashley. She's read it and loved it. So who do you think who's the reader for this?
It's a really diverse readership, and as I guess illustrated by Ashley and myself, but it's one that anyone who's interested in interrogating ideas and our place in our planet, and I guess, you know, just how we live in and how we respond to everyday chaos in our lives. It's not one that I can say, oh, if you liked Tim Winton, you'd like this, or it's quite an individual experience, this book. It's and I think it's one to go back to. It's one that is going to last, because it has so much to say about this time that we're living in. I'm also reading, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm absolutely loving Gail Jones' Our Shadows. This is, Chrissy, you've read this one, I believe.
Oh yes, absolutely. I was in conversation with her for one of our events, which is up on our YouTube channel. She's such a her writing is exquisite. It's almost like, at times it's almost poetry, and I found that it was almost like watching the most exquisite photographs developing on the page, because it doesn't have a fast pace. It's not for anyone who wants a page turner, but it certainly is one that that when, as you keep reading it, you get this richness of these images and these ideas, and the whole picture starts to develop as you're reading. So very, very much for literary readers, not for anyone who wants just a summer page turning read. You don't engage your head.
Exquisite is the word that keeps coming to my mind as well. The prose is just beautiful. It's also rich in character development. It's a character-driven novel, I would say. You know, and the relationships between the sisters. So there's 2 sisters who've been raised by their grandparents. They've been orphaned, and they have their childhood years living and growing up in Kalgoorlie, and they're influenced very much, I guess the whole family, 3 generations of the family are influenced by mining and the way that can affect health, among so many other things. But and then after living in this mining town, both sisters make the decision that they want to get out of there and move to Sydney. So it's a contemporary novel set in contemporary Sydney, but then it's also blended with quite a lot of the elements of the historical novel, and it's really richly written and put together. Just beautiful.
I was really interested too, Jennifer, and there's a section in it which talks about the cave rescue of the Thai boys in the cave, and that takes up quite a significant part of the book, and just how vividly she brought that period back to me. As I was reading it, I remembered watching the news obsessively at that particular time, and I think people will remember it's anything to do with sort of caves and underground and mining, and anyone who has an interest in those ideas will actually love it.
Yeah. So I loved her previous novels, and this one is, anyone who has read Gal Jones before will I'm sure be running out to get that one. Now, this is a novel I'd love to talk to you about, Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa. This is a Palestinian writer, and it is a fascinating book. It starts in that we have a woman a woman of three names who has been incarcerated in the Cube. The Cube is a state-of-the-art prison, and we don't know why she's there. All we know is that the only people she's allowed to speak with on occasion are international journalists. And then what unfolds is the story of a very personal story of this woman's life. Her name is Na Yakut or Assam, depending on which part of her life you're learning about. And she starts out living in Kuwait. So it's a story of her family have been exiled and have ended up in Kuwait. And she's the third generation who've been living in exile. And so it's a story of growing up in Kuwait, the invasion of Saddam Hussein, then having to again leave and ending up as refugees in Jordan. But it's her very personal story of how she, a young girl who, when you meet her, is just looking for love and can possibly end up as what one side would term a revolutionary and what another side would term a terrorist. So it's an extraordinary story. It's very powerfully written. It's one that if you've read Adaf Suef or Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, it's got that tremendous power, and it's a woman's story, and it delves very deeply into the way women are affected in political circumstances such as these. And it's going to be a fascinating one to discuss if any book clubs choose to do it, as one of ours has. I also wanted to talk to you about Mayflies. Now, I don't have the book here, so I printed up the cover. Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan. I fell in love with his writing, with his previous book, The Illuminations. This is, Mayflies, of course, are ephemeral, and this is a book about, I guess, the ephemeral nature of life. It starts out in the summer of 1986 and is the story of, it's a story of male friendship. It's a story of Tully and James. It's a broader circle, but they're our two main characters. And it starts out on a weekend in Manchester when they're heading off to a music festival. So it's this period of life where friends talk to each other in movie quotes and song lines. They are so close. They know everything about each other. It's a beautiful time in the sun, and and then the second half of the novel is set 30 years later in autumn, and it's I guess the title and the sense of life being ephemeral can give you an idea of where the second half goes. But it's a novel that you just feel, it's a real heart novel. It's one that grabs you, and I haven't met anyone who hasn't loved it. Fiona, you've loved this one as well.
Yes, yeah. The first half I just laughed, like it's so funny and witty, and then the second half is a beautiful, beautiful story. It's a celebration of men's friendship, and that's often something that's not really looked at in fiction. And you know, I've been a big fan of Andrew Hagen's work for a long time now, and the writing's wonderful. And there's a little line that I always remember, and it's Jimmy talking about his mate Tully, and he says he was a friend to friendship itself. And to me, that kind of sums up the whole book. It's great for, like, there's lots of great political references as well. Anybody who's lived through the heyday and the politics of the 80s would really enjoy it.
There's also, if you go to our YouTube channel as well, so Google Avid Reader and YouTube, there's a fantastic in conversation between Andrew Hagen and Robert Forster, because the go-betweens are referenced and really important in the book. And that conversation between the two of them is just magic.
Really is. It's such a wonderful event, that one. I just wanted to finish off by mentioning one other book, The Mountains Sing by Nguyen Phan Quay Mai. Quay Mai is a Vietnamese writer. I was in conversation with her a couple of weeks ago. This is also a book that I've read with one of my book clubs, and they voted it their best book club book of the year. It's a story of Vietnam told through 3 generations of one family. So it's addressing issues like French colonialism, Japanese invasion, bombing, the US bombing, civil war, communism. All of those things are in this novel, but this is the story of a family. And through this story of a family, you can understand and get a grip, or gives you a way to understand what's happened to this country through much of the 20th century. And I'll just mention that our book clubs are all coming back in store in 2021, but we are having a dedicated online book club, and their first book of the year is going to be this one. So I just wanted to mention that to you. I finally quickly just wanted to mention my current favourite cookbook, A Year of Simple Family Food. Many of you may know Ostro. This is the previous cookbook by Julia Busutil Nishimura. This one is set up seasonally, and it's different to Ostro in that it also has quite an Asian influence. So it's got that mix of Italian and Asian, and but beautiful cakes, beautiful simple foods, fabulous chicken stew. Everything I've made so far has just been delicious, and her mixing of flavors is just always fabulous. So I just recommend that one. But that's it from me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was really great. We're going to throw to Michaela now. And remember, if you do have any questions on the way, do type them in the chat function. But Michaela Walsh.
Hello. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Betty, and this has been my #1 book for this year. So Betty is by an author called Tiffany McDaniel, and it's actually based on the life of her mother, who was born to a Cherokee father and a white mother. I will preface this by saying, if you have a trigger warning, it is in this book. There is a lot of trauma in there, from poverty to abuse to violence, both inside and outside of the family. So there are some quite confronting scenes in the book. However, it is still absolutely beautiful. The way that Betty narrates the book, there's a lot of that Cherokee influence in the book. So a lot of beautiful stories weaving through it all. And her relationship with her father is just beautiful. They just have this bond because she is the child in the family who looks the most Cherokee. So they have this sort of bond as the two in the family who experience the most racism and that kind of thing. And even within the family, there is a bit of racism, as in like the white siblings and the white mother look down on them because of that. It's very, it's one of those books that will really stay with you. So ever since I finished reading it, I think about it every single day. The intimacy of the novel, by the end of it, you just feel like you know every single character so well, which I guess makes the traumatic scenes all the more traumatic because you feel so attached to the characters. But it really stays with you. And I love the way that it portrays the complicated love within a family. So, you know, even with family members who haven't always been amazing or haven't always done right by you, you know, you still have that love and connection with them. It really is one that will just stay with you and you just won't stop thinking about it once you finish reading it.
Michaela, did it remind you of anything else that you've read?
Yes, similar to A Little Life. And also I've heard people mention as well The Colour Purple, that it's like that one as well. My next book is Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. So this one is a reimagining of the life of Hillary Clinton if she hadn't married Bill. This one drew me in right from the beginning, and I actually had to keep reminding myself that it was fiction because the author absolutely nailed it. Like, it's so believable all the way through. Like, even just the way that she portrays Bill in his youth, it just feels so accurate. So it starts with them meeting in law school, which is how they actually met in real life. It's a little bit like political fan fiction in some ways, gets a little bit raunchy at the beginning, but then their relationship ends and it then follows her journey as a woman, you know, trying to make it in the political world. And one thing I really like about it is that it doesn't portray Hillary as, you know, this perfect human. It portrays her as human. She makes lots of mistakes along the way, but she faces a lot of challenges as a woman trying to make it in politics. And there's lots of, you know, known characters in there. Bill Clinton, obviously, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, they all make an appearance, and it's so clever. I just think the author just did such a wonderful job. And I really like about it as well that I feel like if you know who Hillary Clinton is, then you could read the book and enjoy it. So it could really span across a lot of age groups. If you even vaguely recall everything that went down in, I think it was 1998 with Monica Lewinsky and all of that, then you'll enjoy it. So I was a child when all that.
I have a frozen screen. Does anybody else have a frozen screen? Okay, good. We are losing you, Michaela. Just to let you know, we have lost your vision. So what we might do, because you're completely frozen at the moment. So what we might do is I will throw back to Fiona in 1 second, but I think she expects that you'll be going for a minute. So I'm going to take over. Oh no, Fiona is back.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we've got a frozen screen here.
Oh,
for
Michaela.
Michaela is frozen at a very inopportune
now in the presidential race. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You were frozen for quite a while, Michaela. Can you hear us now? No, she's gone. Okay, so I'm going to throw to Fiona for her recommendations.
Well, I'll start because there's one book that the three of us have really enjoyed. So that's Jennifer, Michaela, and I. It's called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And he's written quite a few other books. This is a little bit different. So it's a story of a woman who dies, And instead of dying, she actually goes into a library, and on the shelves of the library are all the different lives she could have lived. And she's also accompanied by a book of regrets. So it's her going into all these different lives, and it's that what if. So it's not quite sliding doors, but it's that what if I'd made that decision? What if I'd gone here? What if I'd taken that opportunity? And I found it really thought-provoking. The character herself is a philosopher, so there's lots of lovely references to philosophy through it. So what did you think of it, Jennifer?
I loved it. I found it just delightful. I mean, I think it can resonate with everybody. Everybody has that thought of, oh, you know, what if I'd made this decision? And having that ability, it's such a playful idea, that ability to actually go and experience what that life would have been like if you'd made that different decision. And it's just it's very warmly written. And as you mentioned, the philosophical aspect and the questioning is very interesting. And it's almost, for me, it's sort of the thinking person's beach read. It's you know, there's a lightness to it, but it's also got a lot to consider.
And Michaela,
Hello, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I really loved The Midnight Library as well. And one of my favorite things about it is that I think that it really covers a really wide span of people. So I think, you know, even older teenagers would really enjoy it. And then it just goes right through, because everyone, no matter what age, you know, has these sort of regrets, and they think, oh, what if I'd done this? Like, my life would be like this. And so it really, I think, is just such a wonderful read, but it's so easy to read as well. And so if you know someone who maybe doesn't read a whole lot, or is wanting to get back into reading, it's that perfect sort of book for all levels of readers and all different types of reading habits.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And I read this one with one of my book clubs, and I have members who are in their 30s and members who are in their 70s, and everybody loved it. So it has that lovely diversity of appeal.
And Michaela, did you want to continue with some of your?
Yes. So my next one that I was going to talk about was It's Been a Pleasure, Noni Blake. This book is so fun. So it's about Noni Blake, who is a 36-year-old bisexual woman. She's just come out of a very long relationship, and she's just doing all the things that you're supposed to do in life, you know, going to work every day, just, you know, the daily grind kind of thing. And then she has a one-night stand with someone who she then finds out passes away. And this sort of wakes something up in her and makes her realize that, you know, you can lose your life at any moment. And so she decides she wants to live her life with more pleasure in all senses of the word. So she reconnects with this person who was her one that got away, or so she thinks, who happens to be on the other side of the world. So she decides to quit her job, or take leave for 6 months, and head over to the other side of the world to pursue this potential relationship. She gets over there, doesn't quite go according to plan, but she meets so many different people and has all these adventures along the way, or misadventures in some situations. It's very much a queer positive, body positive, just book about loving yourself and, you know, just making decisions because they're the decisions that you want to make, and not because they're what people expect of you. And so even though it's this really, really fun and hilarious rom-com, it also just left me feeling really inspired, just to, you know, that life is to be enjoyed and not just to do what people expect of you. So if you like books with a lot of sex, a lot of adventure, and a lot of inspiration and leaving you feeling good about yourself. And this is definitely one of those. And just one more I have is Ghost by Dolly Alderton. So this one is about a 32-year-old woman who lives in London. She's recently come out of a long-term relationship. She's still very good friends with her ex-boyfriend. She just bought herself an apartment in London, but she is single. And so she decides to try out a dating app. And that might make it sound a bit airy-fairy, but it's about so much more than just the dating. It's also about what friendships are like when you're, you know, a 30-something single woman and your friends are getting married and having children and life is changing and people are moving out to the suburbs and that sort of thing. But also one aspect of it that I really, really loved was how it sort of highlights when you're in your 30s, the role that you have as a child to your parents really changes. And her father is quite unwell. And there's a lot of exploration about that and how it feels to her to sort of that role reversal. And I just think, you know, as a 30-something woman, it really captures that part of your life where it's so many things are changing. And you're just trying to find that right balance between friends and relationships and parents and everything. I just loved it. It was so easy to read. Dolly Alderton is really, really clever in her writing. She notices things about people and situations that we all sort of notice on a subconscious level, but she puts it into words and you're just like, yes, that's exactly it. She just absolutely nailed that, you know, something that you would never be able to articulate yourself. So she's a very clever writer. So even though it does have a little bit of that rom-com-y feel, there's so much more to it than that, and I just loved it.
Great.
Great.
Lovely.
Thank you, Michaela. Now we're going to throw to Fiona for your reads.
Great. And Chrissy did say that the chat function was open. So do feel free to maybe let us know where you're coming from. I'm always fascinated with Zoom where people are located. So feel free to pop your suburb or your postcode into the chat. And also do feel free to tell us what you've been reading this year. Put it in the chat as to what's your favourite book of the year, because I think other people on Zoom would also be keen to see that, and I certainly would as well. So I thought I'd start with the three of the books that my book club have voted as the best books of the year for the various book clubs. So the first one is the Daylight Book Club and the Wednesday Night Book Club. Sorry, that's a very shiny cover. And we've had a tremendous year of reading. I think it was one of the best reading years I've had, and certainly for book club really enjoyed it. So this one that they voted from it was a stiff competition, and it's Colin McCann's extraordinary novel A Paragon. So he is an Irish writer, but this one is the story of the friendship between two men, one Israeli, one Palestinian, and they come together because they're both members of the Combatants for Peace, and they have also both lost daughters through the terrorism. And it's done in an extraordinary way. It's just done in often small paragraph. There's 1,001 paragraphs, and it goes off into all these different areas of thought, contemplation, and ideas. And I was so pleased that Book Club voted it their book of the year, because it is very, very, very moving. It is about a very complex situation, and Colin McCann has done an amazing job. And the two men are real, so it's based on these two men, and they they did extensively promoting peace. It's a really amazing book. Then for the Crime Book Club, they voted The Night Whistler by Greg Woodland. as their crime book of the year. Greg Woodland is a filmmaker. This is his first novel. It's set in the summer of 66, 67. It's about a cop who has moved from, the first book was A Paragon by Colin McCann. Is that what I think the question was? So the Night Whistler, Greg Woodland, so it's about a cop who comes from Sydney to a small country town. He's recovering from PTSD, is what we would call it now, into the small country town. Along comes another family as well, and there's a young boy in the family, and it's their friendship. It's a story of corruption in a council. It's what people are now calling bush noir. I hadn't really heard of this term, but it's bush noir, and Greg Woodland has done a really great job of capturing the simmering tensions in a small country town. And then the High Noon Book Club, which reads award-winning fiction, they voted their book of the year, Hamlet, by Maggie O'Farrell. And this is probably my book of the year, one of my books of the year. It's one of my favourite reads. It's the story of Agnes Hathaway, who's married to William Shakespeare, and the first 12 years of their young son, whose name was Hamlet. And it's the story of how Agnes and William married, because Agnes was about 7 or 8 years older than the young William Shakespeare. She had property. She came from a much higher class, slightly higher class than what William Shakespeare did. And there's always been speculation as to why he married this woman. Maggie pivots that question and she says, well, why would this woman marry him? Maggie has described Agnes as a wise woman. She's a woman who has got like a second sight, and it's just wonderful. And you are so in that Elizabethan period. You are in the streets, in the house. And as I was reading it, the term that came to my mind was intoxicating. So I thought she'd just done a brilliant job. And yeah, it's one of my favourites. For something different, and I liked Jennifer's term of the thinking person's beach read, and my thinking person's beach read is Mr. Wilder and Me by Jonathan Coe. It's the story of a woman, Callista. She is married, she's got twin daughters, they're kind of about to leave home. And she's remembering back on one particular summer in 1976, where through odd, very funny circumstances, she got a job on a movie set. And that was a film being made on the Greek islands. And the film director was Billy Wilder. So Billy Wilder he plays a starring role in this novel, and she's remembering that period. There's some very moving moments in it, but there are also some laugh out loud lines that come verbatim from Billy Wilder. And the other thing that Jonathan Coe has done is that he has addressed that issue of what if what you've got to give nobody wants. So Billy Wilder's at a stage in his film career where he's had a few failures. Hollywood are not going to film, they're not going to finance Fedora. And Callista, as an older woman, she's now dealing with the fact that her daughters don't need her. And that's interesting. And of course, the other interesting part of that is Jonathan Coe is a white, middle-class British male writer. And I think it's an interesting way for him to look at that as well. He's been successful in the past, but I think he's probably had a few novels that haven't really done what they set out to do. And rather than complaining and whining like someone like John Banville has done. Jonathan Coe has addressed that in a really interesting, creative way. And it certainly made me want to go and watch all of Billy Wilder's films. I've missed a few, but it's one of those ones that I laughed and then I had a little tear as well. What else have I got? Oh, a couple of special books. Vesper Flights by Helen MacDonald is a wonderful collection of essays. People might know her from H is for Hawk. And this one, she travels extensively, and a lot of the essays are about everything from birds, very strong nature. She introduced me to this wonderful concept I've never heard of, and that's aeroecology. So there's people who study that that part of the atmosphere where not just birds migrate and fly through, but insects, all kinds of things. And so there's people who study that. Fascinating. And it's one of those ones that I was reading bits out to my partner, even though I knew it was driving him crazy. And I really liked it. It's very thought-provoking. Because sometimes, especially there's like a thinking person's beach read is great, but then also you do want to be challenged and you do want to think about new ideas. That's in summer, and that's the book that I would recommend. Another book which I think is great to give as a gift is The Fire of Joy, and this is about 80 poems that Clive James knew off by heart. So he's sharing those poems with us from the grave, and then there is a small introduction into each of the poems. It's a very eclectic collection. It's very much the poems that Clive James knew and loved. And I just love that notion of learning poems off by heart. And I think that would be a great family thing to do. And certainly if we go into, heaven forbid, another lockdown, I think this would be the book, because we could all just practice remembering poems from heart. And then what else? Oh, there's a book that I didn't know. It's not in the guide, but a customer recommended it to me. It's called The Gifts of Reading, Essays on the Joys of Reading, Giving and Receiving Books. So this is a book to give for those people who love reading, but you're not quite sure what they've got, what they would want to read. And this is a wonderful collection. It starts with an essay by the wonderful Robert Macfarlane, and then it goes through all kinds of people. So there's Alice Pung is in here. It's an international collection. And one of the nicest things about it is that it's also a fundraiser for an organisation called Room to Read. And they do amazing work bringing literacy to some of the most vulnerable children in communities like Cambodia and also throughout Africa as well. So it's just one of those ones that, like Vesper Flights, it's a joy to go into, and it's very thought-provoking. Now I'm going to finish my section with a children's book, which I've just loved, and that is Skunk and Badger by Amy Timberlake. And this is those ones, I think I love children's books that speak to all readers at all ages. So this is a book that you could read aloud to probably a 3+. It's a book that an 8-year-old would love, and a book that a woman of 56 has read and loved as well. So it's the story of Badger, who lives in his aunt's brownstone, and he does very important rock work. So he lives alone doing his very important rock work. And he's very happy living alone until a skunk comes to the house, and he's been told by the Badger's aunt that he too can live in the house. And it's a story of an odd couple. It's a story of finding friendship, the things that do mean a lot in our lives, and what are the important things that mean a lot in our lives. But then it ends with the most beautiful lesson to all of us, and that's how to apologize, how to say sorry. So the Badger has to genuinely say sorry. And as adults, we can see a lot of contemporary political references in here, but of course, kids would just read it at their own level. But for me, it was a hymn to friendship and a hymn to forgiveness as well. So that's where I will leave my little spiel. I've had a great year of reading. I could just go on and on, but I'll spare you all of that.
That's fantastic. Oh, yeah.
I will say I forgot that we are offering 10% off in store from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock today. So if there are anybody here, if you don't feel like shopping online, you can also come into the shop as well.
Fantastic. This has been really amazing. We have some suggestions from the audience as well. The Thing About December by Donald Ryan has been suggested by Colleen. And then there's The Crawdads Sing as a perennial favourite by Delia Owens. Pachinko, another perennial favourite by Min-Jin Lee. The Good People by Hannah Kent. Bruni by Heather Rose. And Devoted by Dean Koontz. A really eclectic suggestion there from Emma Young. So thank you very much for your suggestions. We'd love to hear what our readers are reading. And as Fiona pointed out, we also get some really great tips for books that we can then pass on to the rest of you. So it has been my pleasure to host today and to hear all these amazing books from our wonderful staff. And do remember that our staff are going to be here for the next 12 days of Christmas to recommend other books to you. I know that I forgot to mention my absolute favourite of the year. I'm going to do it right now, which was Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake, which is a book about mushrooms, but it's also about how we need everything in the world to talk to each other. So we need the trees, we need the plants, we need the earth, we need the mushrooms. It's a wonderful ecological book about so much. And this guy is the kookiest scientist you will ever come across. There's a wonderful YouTube up on our events program as well. So do keep that in mind for someone who likes nature. That we've got something for everyone, even for people who are non-readers. I know that our gift section is exploding with games and with puzzles and with little gift ideas as well. So even if you know someone who isn't a reader, you can come in and we will find something for them. I can guarantee you.
And socks. We've got the world's best collection of socks as well.
That's always important. So look, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank Fiona Steger, the best boss that we've ever had, even though I have been remote all year. I still love you.
You're only saying that because you haven't spent every day with me.
This is the first Christmas that I have not been in retail hell. So I can say the first Christmas in 25 years that I haven't been doing retail. And I just want to say I walked into a shop yesterday and remembered just from the other customers what it was like. So if you are shopping, please remember to keep your patient pants on, because this is the most stressful time of the year and the poor retail people are doing it tough. So thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Michaela. And thanks, Genevieve. It's been wonderful hearing from you. Come in, shop, use that 10% discount, loyalty at the checkout, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Thank you all. That was wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Chrissy. That was great. Thank you all for coming. That was really lovely. Thank you.